probably know, if you've read any of the New Testament and if you've heard the stories of Jesus, Jesus was a master storyteller, and he was a master teacher. He was great at instructing, and what he did was he pulled from common scenarios people were familiar with in the day, whether it be from the parable of the sower to wineskins, all of those things that people were familiar with in every day. So what we're doing over the next couple of weeks here is we're actually going to play for you some songs that are not necessarily touted as Christian songs, but God can redeem those things, and there can be messages in songs that we hear every day. So today we're going to play a song, and we're going to use it to let it be something that is familiar, that creates a message for you. But let me set it up here just a little bit. We are in a time like no other. The last 12 months have been crazy. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, who would ever thought that we would be where we are in our country with the spread of infection and a virus and all the precautions that has made us to take, to the tension in our world, to a crazy election cycle, to people being divided, racial tension, gender tension, identity crisis, anxiety, depression. And then, to top it off, we had an Arctic blast, at least in Texas, that we hadn't seen in 100 years. And in Texas, we don't know what to do with Arctic blasts. You may not believe this, but a lot of people in Texas for some reason, have their water tanks in their attic, their hot water tank. I don't know why they do. Maybe they just thought they'd throw it up there for safekeeping. I don't know. But when you have Arctic weather come and your hot water tank freezes, it's one thing if it's in the garage and it busts on the garage floor. It's another thing if it busts in your attic and it floods your whole house. Many people I know had their whole house flooded. Our school that I'm a principal, high school principal at, flooded, and there was 3 inches of water in every part of the high school, and we're recovering from that. On top of that, this week, we were in displaced classrooms because of that. We were having math in the choir room, English in the band hall. We were set up in the cafeteria, just what rooms we could find. The fire alarm went off twice and cleared the building, okay? And so sometimes you just think, can one more thing happen? And many of you may be in that scenario today. Maybe you are at just the brink. If one more thing happens, I just don't think I could make it. Maybe you're in the midst of a long journey, a long crisis, and you're thinking, will this ever end? And there's probably a million reasons for you to give up. There's probably a million reasons for you to quit. And we have an enemy. The Bible says that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but our struggle is against principalities, powers, rulers of this present darkness, spiritual forces of wickedness in heavenly places. And we have a devil who walks about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And he wants to devour you, and he's going to help give a million reasons for you to give up. But all you need is one reason to keep going. One reason. So we're going to play a song called Million Reasons, and there is a worship leader, actually, you're going to hear, who re-recorded this song. And this worship leader was about ready to give up. He was in crisis, going through a lot of things, and he was drinking alcohol in excess to try to numb. And he had a million reasons to give it up and throw it all away, but he found one reason to keep going until he got through. And that one reason was Jesus. And so he has recorded this song, and we're just going to let you get blessed with it. So keep the song.
You're giving me a million reasons to let you go, and you're giving me a million reasons to quit the show, and you're giving me a million reasons, give me a million reasons, giving me a million reasons, about a million reasons. If I had a highway, I would run for the hills. If you could find a dry way, I'd forever be still. And you're giving me a million reasons, give me a million reasons, giving me a million reasons, about a million reasons. I bow down to praise. try to make the worst seem better. Lord, show me the way. Cut through all this worn out leather. I've got 100 million reasons to walk away, but baby, I just need one good one to stay. Head stuck in a cycle, I look off and I stare. It's like that I stop breathing but completely aware. Cause you're giving me a million reasons. Give me a million reasons. Giving me a million reasons. About a million reasons. And if you say something that you might even mean, it's hard to even fathom which parts I should believe. Cause you're giving me a million reasons. Give me a million reasons. Giving me a million reasons. About a million reasons. Try to make the worst seem better. Lord, show me the way to cut through all this worn out leather. I got 100 million reasons to walk away, but baby, I just need one good one to stay. Baby, I'm bleeding, bleeding, stay. Can't you give me what I need and need it? Every heartbreak makes it hard to keep the faith. But baby, I just need one good one, good one, good one, good one, good one, good one. When I bow down to pray, I try to make the worst seem better. Lord, show me the way to cut through all this worn out leather. I got 100 million reasons to walk away, but baby, I just need one good one, good one. Tell me that you'll be the good one, good one. Baby, I just need one good one to stay.
I believe that God can speak to us through anything. I believe He does. And I believe that a lot of people that write songs that aren't necessarily under the Christian banner still have gifts, still have amazing talents that God has given them. You know, God says that the gifts and callings of God are without repentance. And so I believe there's a real redemption sometimes when we can take something and see what the Lord's saying in it. And so there's a lot of times the Lord speaks to me out of a movie. Even though everything about that movie may not be wholesome, God can speak. And He can speak through a song. There's something powerful about the arts and about drama and about song. And so I believe God can absolutely redeem things like this. So this song, A Million Reasons, has a real message in it. Because it's true that there are a million reasons to give up. But you just need one. Just one reason to keep going. Jesus said to His disciples something very interesting in John chapter 12, verses 23 and 27. He said, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." In other words, my hour is coming when I'm supposed to go to the next thing, to go to the next level, to be taken back up into heaven. "And now my soul has become troubled. And what am I to say? Father, save me from this hour? But for this purpose I came to this hour." And the next verse says, "Father, glorify your name." When you think about Jesus, obviously was perfect, right? He was God. But He was at a point in his journey here that He was troubled. You know, it's okay. It's okay to feel troubled. God gave us our emotions to process things, process information. And Jesus was troubled. And We see in other accounts of the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus was way more than troubled. He was in agony, and he sweat great drops of blood, and he had a million reasons to not go through with the plan. It wasn't fair what he was going through. He didn't deserve what was happening to him, and he didn't want really to go through it. He had to set his will aside for the will of the Father. So all of those reasons were Jesus was experiencing a million reasons, yet there was one reason that he went ahead and went through. And so the first point here is, number one, don't give up hope. I could have said don't give up hope, but I wanted to make a definite distinction there. Don't give up hope. Next slide. We need to fix our eyes. It says Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2 says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus, for the joy set before him. That is crazy to think about. The joy wasn't the cross. The joy wasn't the suffering. The joy wasn't the lashes that he took on his back that ripped his skin so much that you could probably see his internal organs. That wasn't the joy. The joy set before him was you. The joy set before him was, I am going to redeem these people and call them my own. That was his joy. That's the reason God put us here, was so that where he is, you could be also. You know, I'm a high school principal, and in chapel, one day a student asked one of these tough questions that students tend to ask because they're not afraid to ask them. And I had a student ask and say, why did God put us on this earth if he knew we were going to sin? Why did he put man here if he knew there was going to be death and destruction and people turning away from him? And so I took the mic and answered, it was more important to him to have a relationship with you than it was to have people here that did everything right. It was worth it for the joy of being with you and knowing you and having a relationship with you, because he put us here for a relationship. A million reasons in the Garden of Gethsemane. A million reasons. And Jesus was troubled. And that was okay. He was feeling it. But one reason he went through it. It was the joy set before him, and that is you. So, I wanted to tell a personal story here. My journey in the end of my 9th grade year, I was in public high school, and it wasn't really working out for me. And I felt the Lord specifically tell me to go to a Christian school. And it was about an hour drive away. Where we lived in Oklahoma, we were far away from a lot of modern conveniences, and the closest Christian school was an hour away. So I got my driver's license when I turned 16, and a week later I was driving an hour one way to school. And it was a great, great thing. This Christian school, I really found myself. I learned to play the piano, learned to lead worship. And so I went to high school there, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. And after I graduated high school, there was a newly formed college right there on the same campus, very small. And I pretty much determined I was going into ministry anyway, so I decided to go to the college there. The problem was the college was not accredited yet, but it was working on being accredited, and we were promised it would be accredited by the time I graduated. So I went to 4 years of college. In the middle of my 4-year journey in college, I started feeling a prick in my heart for education. And I really wanted to go into education, to be a teacher, be an administrator. And so I think it was my sophomore year, I went into the college registrar. Now here's where I'll build a little bit of background of this school. This school was also a part of a church. A lot of great things about it, but there were a lot of things that were unhealthy about it too. And one of the things is it was very kind of controlling. It was kind of a community that was very tight-knit. One could even use the word cultic in some of its practices. Now, that might sound a little strong, but that's kind of, it was just very tight-knit, and you kind of did what the community said. Some of you may be wondering, Josh, how am I going to identify with this story? I don't think there's anyone back there saying, yeah, honey, remember when we were involved in that cult? So, but there are parts of it that I think that you can. This is not everyone's journey, but this was mine. And so my sophomore year, I sat down with the college counselor, and I said, because there were only 2 degrees offered. It was ministry, church ministry, or education. And I said, I think I want to switch to education. She said, no. No, that's not what God has for you. So I was like, okay. So I finished up my degree, and after I graduated college there, I started working the next year at the college. And for a variety of reasons, I, after my 1 year of working there, had a falling out with the college president, who was also the pastor there, and we kind of parted ways. But it wasn't an easy parting of ways, and I found myself just in a day, all of my friends were gone. Nobody would talk to me. I had a degree that didn't mean anything. I lost all my community, and my only choice was really to go work construction. So I went and started working construction, and I was going through this withdrawal of I didn't have this community, and why, God, why this isn't fair? This wasn't my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. And so I knew that my heart, though, was back to when I was a sophomore. I wanted to be in education. And so the state of Oklahoma had a program that you could get alternatively certified. And so if you have a degree, you can just go and you can go through a program where you can get teacher certified, but you have to go back to school. And so I called the State Department of Oklahoma, and they said, nope, your college is not accredited. So I'm going through all of these things of, I just wasted about 7 years of my life. I wasted all my college. I went to 4 years of college, and it doesn't mean anything. They promised it would be accredited, and it was not. Not only that, I lost all my friends. I lost all my influence. I lost everything. And so worked construction for a couple years, met my wife, Tammy, realized I wanted to get out of construction. I wanted to be either in ministry. The doors of ministry were not opening. I called the State Department of Oklahoma back and said, my college is working on getting accredited. Can you accept me into the program of alternative certification? They said no. Waited about a year, called back and said, listen, I think they're accredited now. Can you grandfather me in? Nope, you graduated before they were accredited. The answer is no. And I was discouraged. I was like, I'm married. I've got a kid on the way now. I'm working construction. It's seasonal, barely making ends meet. And I feel like my life has been nothing. Finally, my wife told me, said, Josh, go to the State Department of Oklahoma, go to the alternative department, and sit there outside the door. Just sit there and don't take no for an answer. So I did. I drove up to the State Department, asked to see the alternative ed person in charge, went and sat outside his office. And when he came to his office, I said, I'd like to see you. And I brought my transcript from my college. And I'd received no so many times, I just knew what they were going to say. So I walked into his office. He looked at my transcript. He said, oh, yeah, this will work. Stamp approved. Into the program. Just a few months later, I got a job teaching high school English. The next year, they wanted to make me the principal there. Of course, I didn't have any credentials to do that. Year after that, God told us to move to Texas. We moved to Texas. I taught 5th grade for 2 years and then moved up to be a principal, and I've been a principal now for 10 or 11 years. And my daughter has gotten to go to her whole life to a Christian school that with a tuition no way I could afford. God has blessed. And I'll look back and think, what if I hadn't gone up there and demanded that? What if I would have given up? Because I had a million reasons to give up. But you only need one reason to keep going. And that one reason is hope. It's the hope of what is going to be the outcome on the other side. Jesus's one reason was you, the joy set before him. And so there can be a million things right now screaming at you to give up. Maybe it's not career like I was. Maybe it's not having to do with your job. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a marriage. Maybe it's a physical condition that you're walking through. There's a million reasons to give up, but you just need one. So don't give up hope. Don't give up the one reason. And the reason is that there is hope on the other side. That you have Jesus, who is the author and the finisher of your faith. And he's been where you have been. Don't give up. Find the one reason to get you through. You just need one. Number 2, don't discount the journey. So, I'm going to explain what this means. Next slide. This is talking about Jesus. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered. Now, I want you to think about this just for a second. Do you realize that Jesus actually learned something? Whoa, but he was God. He was already perfect. But Jesus learned something. It says he learned obedience from the things he suffered. You've probably heard this. It's probably been the title of t-shirts and bumper stickers and books. You can get bitter or you can get better. Do you know that Jesus got better? Now that's kind of hard to swallow. But before Jesus suffered the things he suffered, he was not our Savior, was he? Before Jesus suffered the things he suffered, he was not our high priest. But having suffered what he did, having been tempted in every way, he became the author of our salvation, and he became our perfect high priest. Is that not better? So if Jesus can get better, we can get better. That doesn't mean spinning your wheels at things that don't work, but what it does mean is you are not in a situation right now where you are unable to get better. Okay, let me tell you another story, and this is a story that we don't see very often. We don't hear it very often. Isaac. Remember Isaac in the Bible? Isaac was the son of Abraham. And so Abraham had been called by God. We know the story about Abraham. Abraham and Sarah were very old, and at 100 years old, they gave birth to Isaac. And God promised Abraham that his descendants would be as the sand of the sea or the stars in the sky. And so here we have Isaac, and one of the first things that happens to Isaac is his dad almost kills him. How about that to start out life? Takes him up a mountain, says, "Hey, where are we going, Dad?" "Oh, we're going to sacrifice." Has to carry the wood that's going to be the fuel to sacrifice him. Gets up on the mountain there, and an angel stops his dad from killing him. That's probably a pretty traumatic experience. So we don't see a whole lot about Isaac's journey, but we do see a window into it in Genesis chapter 26. Genesis chapter 26, Isaac has married Rebekah, and God speaks to Isaac. He says, "Hey, I've made a promise to your dad. Now I'm going to make a promise to you. I'm going to bless you greatly. Now get out of the land where you are." Ever stepped into something unknown? Ever set out on a journey where you're like, this is not familiar at all and I don't like it? We don't like the unfamiliar because we find comfort in the familiar and the routine. You know why people have such struggle with change is because change, we find our identity in it because it's familiar and usual. But you can't grow without change. And so God calls him and Rebekah out, and he's trying to find his own footing. He's trying to live out from under his dad's shadow. How many of you have ever tried to get out from your family history? How many of you have ever felt defined by your family name, your family of origin? So he goes to live with the king of the Philistines. Now, the Philistines are the enemy, okay? So he's going to live with them. And it's so funny because the same thing happens to him as happened to his dad. The king and a lot of people there desire Rebecca because she's so beautiful. So he does the same mistake his dad did, and he lies to him and says, oh, this is my sister. Ever made the same mistakes your parents did? Ever felt that you are a captive, a victim of the mistakes of those that have gone before you? So Isaac's in a strange land, and all of a sudden there's a famine in the land. Totally a dry place. And so he's in a famine, he's making mistakes, he's in a strange place, but here's what the Bible says he does. It says in that year, he sowed, and he reaped 100-fold. 100-fold in a time of famine. Nobody can stop you from getting better. Nobody can stop you from growing. When you're in a famine, when you're in a hard time, sow in good soil, which is you. Get around people who can make you better. Read a book, take a class, but also give to others. One of the hardest things for people to learn is don't sow your bread and don't eat your seed, because there's two extremes. Some people are such givers that they don't ever take any nourishment for themselves and they end up sowing their bread. Don't sow your bread, eat your bread. Nourish with what God's given your daily bread. But on the other hand, don't eat your seed. If God's given you something to be a seed, make sure that you're sowing. Sow a good word into someone. Sow financially into good soil. Go help someone out. I want to throw a scripture up here. It's in Psalms 126. And everyone felt like this? Lord, change our circumstances for the better. Like the dry streams in the desert waste. Now, one translation says, Lord, restore us as the streams in the south. The streams in the south they're referring to are the Negev. And in the Negev, it was a very desert, arid place. But when it would rain, it would come in like a flood and just flood all that desert. And so he's saying, Lord, change our circumstances and do it quickly. Do it like a flood on the desert. Let those who plant with tears reap the harvest with joyful shouts. Those who go out crying and carrying their seed will come home with joyful shouts, carrying their bales of grain. Listen, a lot of times when you sow, it's in hard times. Jesus was sowing when he went to the cross. But you reap with joyful shouting. What do you do in a time when you need restoration? What do you do in a time when it's dry and you have a million reasons to give up? So, get better. Those who sow in tears, and a lot of times it is in tears, will reap with joyful shouting. Listen, you are not the sum of your circumstances. Where you are now is not the end of the story. You are not the sum of your family history. You are not the sum of your mistakes. You are not the sum of your feelings, although feelings are very real and you need to move through the feelings. You are who the Word says you are. You are who God says you are. You're a victor, not a victim, and you just need one reason to keep going. Someone here I can feel this morning, you feel, and it's very real, you feel the captivity of your history. But God says, I'm rewriting your history. Come on. God says, I'm rewriting your history. Isn't it amazing the difference a day can make? Isn't it amazing the difference it can make with just one swing of the bat? One swing of the bat can make a baseball player a hero, and no one will ever remember his other 300 strikeouts. That is not the story. The story is they hit the home run. The song, didn't we sing it? He's rewriting my history. He covers me with destiny. His blood speaks a better word. That was a prophetic song we sang today, and it's for you. He's rewriting your history. Last point. Don't get stuck. Move. Don't get stuck. Move. We've probably heard a lot of things about attitude and motivational speaking. Speaking about attitude has been around for a long time, so please don't get turned off by attitude. I got turned off a lot by it because people would just say, well, just change your attitude. Get your attitude right. So just hear me in what I'm saying. Attitude is, if you're talking about flying, aviation, it's your orientation to the ground, your orientation to the horizon. It means adjust. Adjust a little bit because you control your attitude. And that doesn't mean you can't feel sad for a little bit. Doesn't mean you can't feel depressed. Jesus did. Doesn't mean you can't process through. But you can't stay stuck there. In 2 Kings chapter 7, there was another famine going on. 3 armies surrounded Samaria. And the city was in such dire straits, such barrenness. I mean, the word I'm looking for is they didn't have food. Okay, they were locked in. The supply routes were all locked in. So like pigeon dung was selling at high dollar. A donkey's head was selling at high dollar because no one had anything else to eat. People were thinking of eating their children. That's how bad it was. And at the gate of this city, in 2 Kings 7, were 4 lepers. Now, their fate was already pretty bad if you're a leper, okay? There's no cure. So at the gate of this city were 4 lepers. And they're like, look, we're dead anyway. If we go into the city, we're going to die because we can't buy any food there. We might as well go out to the enemy who's surrounding us and see if they'll give us something. Who knows? Maybe they'll take us in and give us food. Sometimes when you have a million reasons just to stay stuck, all you got to do is move. Because here's the statement that one of the lepers made to the enemy. He said, if we stay here, we die. Sometimes the don't give up is not staying in that toxic relationship. Sometimes the don't give up is move. And why don't we move? Because it's comfortable, familiar, and we get afraid of change. We get our identity wrapped up in that toxicity, and we say, well, that's who I am. It's not who you are. A leper at the gate is not who you are. It's not the end of the story. So these lepers, they start shuffling towards the enemy. And God causes the sound of them shuffling towards the enemy. All they could see, all they were looking for is maybe we can get some food. That was their hope. God caused the sound of their shuffling to bounce off of the mountains and to sound like a great army marching towards this army that had surrounded Samaria. And the armies trembled and dropped everything they had and fled. 4 lepers plundered 3 armies. But at the time, that wasn't their hope. They were just hoping for, maybe we can get some food, but it was enough to get them moving. Again, maybe what you're going through today is life or death. Maybe it's so bad, so depressing. So I'm about to tell a story, and it may not sound that bad, but it was a story I felt led to share. When I was 16 years old, I was riddled with anxiety but didn't know it at the time. Had no idea till later. just riddled with social anxiety. And my dad, who I love, who is with Jesus now, and I'll see him again one day soon, things were pretty much his way or the highway at our house. And so he had just taken over pastoring a church when I was 16. And shortly after he was there, the worship leader left. And I went into his office and I said, "Hey, Dad, I've got an idea. I've got a friend that can come lead worship for us." And Dad said, "No, you're going to lead worship." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I can't play, or I don't even know how to play the piano. I can't." He said, "No, you're going to lead." And that was the end of it. There wasn't, "Oh, I'll get you a teacher to help you." It was just, you're going to play, and I get up there and play. So Jason was 17 at the time, 17 or 18, and he started playing the drums, and he had never played the drums before. And we had an upright piano at our little church of 40 people that was so awesome that half of the white covers were missing off the white keys. It was out of tune. And so I learned how to play one song. I learned how to play a little bit of a song called "We Will Worship the Lamb of Glory." The problem was, about halfway through, the first time we were leading worship, I did terrible. I couldn't read the music and look at my hands and sing at the same time. It was so awful that afterwards I was so torn up, I was running a temperature. Jason had to drive me home early because I was so sick. And in those days, we had Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night church. And there was not a question that I was going to lead worship the next time because I didn't have a choice. Now, I guess I could have had a bad attitude. I guess I could have just dug my feet in and refused, but it was that or nothing. And it was the one of the worst experiences of my life. And some of you may identify getting up in front of people and making an idiot out of yourself is not fun. I don't think my dad would quite realize it. He was like, "Oh, you can do fine." So for a long time, the worship set list was "We will worship the Lamb of Glory," or at least half of "We will worship the Lamb of Glory." People would say, "Hey, what are we singing today?" "We worship the Lamb of Glory." Got a problem with that? It was awful. It was awful. I would go home and cry, but we had a piano at home that was an upright piano. It wasn't much better than the one we had at church. It had half the white covers missing too. I guess that was just where we were at the time. It was just, we got pianos with white covers missing off the keys. And so when my fingers wouldn't do what I told them to do, when I just couldn't get the beat right, I just began to worship because there was nothing else to do. I couldn't do nothing. If I stay here, I'd die. So I would just worship. And we were living in our new house that my dad built, and the downstairs wasn't finished, so just in a little sheetrock room that was all those up sheetrock, I would just play and sing at the top of my lungs and just worship because that's all I could do, because I certainly wasn't playing the notes right. Little by little, this was in August that I started. Little by little, September, October rolls around, we can play a whole set list. December, January, it was getting a little better. We get a little more songs to our repertoire. By March, I could play without looking at music at all. I spent hours worshiping. I spent hours practicing. I was not looking for this grandiose, one day I'm going to be training people how to lead worship. I'm going to be giving piano lessons. I'm going to be traveling to other countries and leading worship. I was just like, I'm just going to get through the next service without getting embarrassed. That was my goal. That was my hope. That was my one reason. And sometimes that's enough. So the church that had sent my dad over to be the pastor of this little church was a church of about 200. And we were at this little church of 40 people. Well, this church decided in March, because they sent us over in June, I started leading worship in August, failed miserably for about 6 months. And in March, I'd gotten pretty good. I didn't have to read music. It was just me and Jason on the drums. And this church of 200 decided to come over and have church with us. And they knew me and Jason. We went to their church as junior high kids, but they didn't know what God was doing in our lives. And so they came over and they crowded in. 200 people crowded in to our little church sanctuary. Air conditioner couldn't even keep up. And so they didn't know I could lead. They didn't know that's what so I went into the first song. Jason cracked we started. I don't even remember what the first song was. We sang the first song. And it was like heaven opened up. And God poured his Spirit into that room and filled the whole room. After the first song was completed, I couldn't start the second song because 200 people were shouting at the top of their lungs because the glory of the Lord filled the room. About 5 minutes later, we started the second song. And at the end of the second song, it was the same thing. The heavens opened up and the glory of the Lord filled the room. And it was like, I don't think we ever made it to the third song. People started just getting touched. People started speaking words of encouragement to each other. That's not what I thought would happen. I thought, maybe I can just get through this and be okay. Sometimes, all you have to do is lift up your eyes to the author and the perfecter of your faith. And all you're looking at is, I just need to get through. So you move and you get better. And God says, my destiny for you is so much bigger than you can even imagine. The Bible says, I have not seen, nor ear heard, nor has it entered the heart of man what God has prepared for those who love him. He is the one who is able to do exceedingly abundantly, far above all you ask or think, according to his power that is at work within you. Now, I will tell you, there's still some journeys I'm walking through right now. I don't see the end. 5 years ago, my daughter was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that we're walking through. We've seen some victory. I don't see the end yet, but I tell you, she is not a Crohn's disease. That is not who she is. She is not a person who can't eat and walk and exercise, and we're seeing a lot of strides, but I'm telling you, we have not seen the end of the story, but I believe. I would have despaired, the psalmist said, I would have despaired unless I believed I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And where you are right now is not where you're going to be. The last chapter has not been written. The last verse of the song has not been written. You are a victor, not a victim. You are more than a conqueror, not because of how you feel, not because of what your history says, not because of what your family said, not because of what your doctor said, but because the Word says you are more than a conqueror, and God gets the last word in your life, and His Word is better. Come on.